Now, the Black Sash has welcomed the announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa that the 350 Rand COVID-19 social relief of distress grant will be extended for another year. But it says it should now be lifted to 624 Rand. The grant was introduced during COVID to help the unemployed with no other form of support, although it was extended to others already receiving a child support grant. Currently, around 10 million South Africans are benefiting. Groups across society have called for something more permanent with a higher payment, a basic income grant. What we got from the President in the State of the Nation address was just that extension for now. To discuss, we're joined by the National Education and Training Manager at Black Sash, Amanda Rinquest. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Rinquest. So there are all these lines, poverty line, food poverty line. Tell us exactly why you're calling for 624 Rand.
Thank you, and good evening, Francis. Thank you so much for having me. So annually, SARS takes a look at the cost of food, the cost of basic services, the cost of basic needs, and it determines what is the absolute minimum amount someone needs to not starve to death. And that amount is determined at 624 Rand. That's the absolute minimum you need to not be in abject poverty. The grant, the 350 grant, while it is a good move towards having a permanent universal basic income, it is still, I think, 40% below what is the absolute standard needed for someone to not starve. And so that's why the Black Sash is calling for the SARS amount of the upper bound poverty line at 624 Rand.
And that doesn't even include things like the cost of applying for a job and trying to get employed and do things like that.
That doesn't even include basic services like buying electricity or gas or wood fire. That's just the lowest amount needed. The upper bound poverty line, which is 1,300 Rand, includes services like transport that you need to apply for a job, being able to print your CV, being able to buy petrol or gas or electricity. And so this amount is really what we're asking for to help people access the economy, not for people to live off of 624 Rand. That's not a dignified life for all, but for people to be able to go and look for a job, go and start their own, small like businesses. We know lots of pensioners use their the old age grant to sell fruits and vegetables so that people have some way in which they can support themselves and access the economy.
The President did say there are consultations, and it seems like there is growing political will for this. But he did say any future support must pass the test of affordability and must not come at the expense of basic services or the risk of unsustainable spending. Does the amount that you're putting forward pass that test?
Firstly, I think we must interrogate the President's statement, and we must interrogate whether allowing a basic income grant is going to take away from other basic services, or whether what is actually needed is a capable state, a competent government, a government that makes sure its expenditure is in line with public finance laws, make sure that it combats corruption, it stops wasteful expenditure, so that there is no need for us to weigh up these two important things together. There is no need for us to put basic income support and other basic services up against each other. What South Africans and what people in South Africa need is comprehensive social assistance that meets people's needs, and so no one has to suffer, no one doesn't have income, no one doesn't have access to proper healthcare services. Schools in Mpumalanga have all the resources that they need, like you've just reported. And so that's the first question we need to ask ourselves. And the second question is, the second part of what the President is saying is that these two things, not only must these two things not work together, they must be sustainable. And the Black Sash believes that basic income support and its broader call for universal basic income is sustainable, because what we've seen is that it's allowed people to access the economy. People are spending that money in their local communities, at shops. It's going back into the local economy.
I think economic theory is hard for all of us to understand, and economists often differ, but there is that argument, so just tell us more, where you can actually stimulate the economy through the spending, or certainly stimulate township economies and things like that.
Well, I will start by confessing that I am an attorney by profession, and so we should never ever broach economics because we're not good with numbers. But I will
I'm
say
a journalist and I do it all the time, Ms. Rinquest.
We're going to get into trouble. What I will say is that lots of people have presented to the president and presented to the Minister of Social Development models for how we can fund this. Organizations like the Institute for Economic Justice and lots of other organizations have given the president a model for how this can happen. Black Sash has also presented a report. And what we're trying to say is that we want us to spend in order for us to stimulate people so that we can. The economics behind it is that people use the grant that they get in their local economy. There's lots of stories about this ice cream business that people have contested and uncontested the story, and I don't want to go into that. But what we do know is that there are lots of examples of people using their grant to create another form of income for themselves. We know this from pensioners who are often starting small fruit stalls or often using it for small creches that they open. We know these things happen, and they're anecdotal, but the idea is still that people are using that grant not to just sit at home, but they're using it so that the evidence overwhelming is that people are using it to access the economy, to go and apply for a job, to go and print their CV, to go and get data to do online applications, etc.
All right. Well, we will certainly hear about the basic income grant, those calls growing in coming months. Thank you very much for your time. That was the National Education and Training Manager at Black Sash, Amanda Rinquest. Let's take a look at your weather.